Let's go. Do you want to go to the next group and then we will catch up with all the questions afterwards? Is that okay?
Yeah, that works.
Is it? Okay. Here. Group 3. This one. You see it?
Now it's still a file thing.
Huh?
It's still on your files.
Okay. So that's because there's somewhere where I have to say I have to say share. There we go. Sådan. Okay?
All right. So obviously, I kind of separated them into categories, just like bullet points I was just going to talk about. Misrepresentation obviously dealt with the more feminine side of it and what it means to be feminine. What I took away from it was it started out, it was women are supposed to be smart, but not too smart. The idea I had behind that was kind of just like, we raise women more to appeal to men. Well, at least it was expressing in this video, that when we appeal to men more, that they're smart, but not too smart because it overshadows men. And they referenced that a lot, especially when it came to women in leadership roles. Because you see so few women in those leadership roles, and basically when they are in those leadership roles, they can be sexualized, or anything about their appearance can be used to bring them down, which you just don't see with men. And the big thing I noticed about this video was that it was recorded and filmed in 2011, and I think since then, I've seen a big shift in women in leadership roles. I actually find it to be pretty common. But I could see definitely from the examples they were giving, it was not the same. And I'm happy to see this change, but I have noticed it getting a little better, although there's still a lot of work to do. And then the Masculine covers what it means to be masculine. This one, I identified with a little bit more. So you're raised to be strong and powerful. Luckily, that wasn't always the case with my life, but any showing of weakness was a bad thing. And I think I noticed this most when I was in like elementary school, and they did a whole big part on that in the show, and I thought it was really interesting how they explored the life like going as you got older.
Which particular part was that?
That was they did a lot of, even in like right in the intro, they shot like it started as like this boy's face, and it like went through all the things that is said to him as he grows up, like be a man.
Yeah.
And then I remember they cut to a part in the school where they did the whole mask thing, and I thought that was really cool to actually see people participating in. I know in high school it's the last thing they want to do, so I thought it was really cool that they actually went in depth with that. But yeah, lack of empathy. They all on that mask thing, they talked about their internal anger and stuff like that, and how it can be lonely to live in this like fake hypermasculated world. And they also talked about, they did like an experiment, I think, if I remember correctly, the hierarchy, and how like the real bully, like the one who takes the most dominance, is on top. And then there's just some questions if Nicole wants to do those.
So some questions we kind of drew from both of them. So for males, like, do you personally connect with the hyper-masculine hierarchy mentioned in the Masculine? And then where would you say you've fallen on the hierarchy? And that one's for the guys in the class.
Just me and Colin, but
What? Sorry?
It's just for me and Colin, I guess, but yeah.
What do you say, Colin?
I just think it's like interesting that we're the only two, and we could just bring like the male's perspective,
Yeah, that's like I bring the Danish perspective.
About gender. Come again?
It's like I bring the Danish perspective. Anything I
Yeah.
say, you sort of say, okay, that's how the
Which we
Danish.
never got to see. You're right.
Yeah.
And then for like females, so misrepresentation was released in 2011, and as Alden talked about how like now since 2011 some things have obviously been changing. So would you say that since then there have been very visible changes in media and now like women are represented more in leadership roles, or do you think that it's kind of still, I mean, it's getting better but it's still not as good as it could be? And then what else can media companies do to promote the idea of feminism and exclude sexualized stigmas? So does anybody have any ideas or thoughts?
Great questions.
I think there's definitely been an increase in at least television. I don't know about movies with strong female leads who have real character. And what comes to mind immediately is the movie Bombshell, which just came out, which is a commentary on the Me Too movement, but it's all about females navigating a male-dominated environment. So I think that couldn't have even been made, a decade, 15 years ago. So the fact that that exists and it was such a hit with such, incredible cast and all that says a lot about what's going on in the world right now.
Is that the one with Charlize Theron? Bombshell? It didn't come here. But I've noticed also, I mean, like in Netflix and HBO, it's almost all, I mean, a lot of the series are with female leads now. And I think that's also because they've done some research in who actually decides what people are watching at home. And I mean, I can only speak for myself, but in this, here in our house, I'm the one who decides what to see in TV. If it's not, any musical program, then it's me who says, oh, I found this one, you want to watch it with me? Or else I see it by myself because my husband is not that much into this thing. So I mean, I think this is the whole role model discussion also, that you can actually, if you can see it, you can be it, and you can, relate to problems that are not all about men, but also about other stuff in the fiction area.
That's like kind of what Abby was saying with the test.
Yeah, exactly. It's the
actually,
yeah.
Women are actually having conversations on TV that don't revolve around men, which is way more interesting to watch and actually realistic.
Yeah.
I definitely agree that in like movies and TV shows now on Netflix or in other shows, like women are now more present than they were before. Where like when I was reading and watching these movies, I kind of thought about how I don't know if you've seen like Ocean's 8 came out with like a whole female cast doing the, I don't know if you've seen Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12 in the past, but that was all like men doing the heists and all that stuff. And now they came out with, in 2018, they came out with one that was like all women doing it, which obviously like just kind of just shows that it's not, it just like gave way to them in movies and stuff. But I do think that in that aspect, women are definitely like seen more often, but more in like media when it comes to like political things or like government, like all that kind of stuff. I think women are still not portrayed in the way that they should be. So it's getting better in some areas and not improving as much in others.
What I always am surprised about when I see American movies and series is that these business women are wearing these incredibly high heels. And I mean, everybody who's ever worn high heels knows what a torture instrument it is. So it's like, how can you work and how can you walk around in your office all day with those shoes on? I mean, and it's still, and also I'm seeing at the moment, this, The Good Fight. Have you seen it? It's sort of a law drama thing. And all the women are very slim and very, of course, with high heels, pencil skirts, and no bellies, no tummies, no nothing. It's just they're sort of fitting in a mold. Everybody. So we might have some distance to cover yet.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point, because even though we are incorporating a lot more women in these higher roles, or like these higher status roles, there is definitely still an aspect of the male gaze where these women are in some sort of power in these roles, but they're also still meant to look attractive and look put together for male viewers, which of course is a problem.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, even they are portrayed in that way to make women want to aspire for that role also. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, not all men like women in, you know, all this, or they are brought up to liking that. And I think you also wrote in your critical response paper about the male gaze, right? And I think it's really, could you explain to the group a bit more about that? And then I'll try and change the slide for the next group.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on it, but the male gaze is essentially, it explains how women are put in positions to look good for men. So it's kind of like there's always a male gaze on them. So that's why women are constantly seen fixing their appearance or looking at themselves in the mirror, or even taking photographs of them. It's because it's not that they're looking good for themselves necessarily, it's because they want to look good for the men who are watching them.
Yeah. Or even for their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on. Keep going.
I mean, I guess you can kind of see that in a lot of movies and even in like a lot of old Renaissance paintings, which is how one of my old media studies teachers told our class about it. Was like there's a lot of paintings of women who are looking at themselves in the mirror and they're brushing their hair, or they're admiring themselves, and the reason why they're doing that is because they want to look good for either the man who's painting them or for the man who's gonna buy the painting,
yeah,
stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting analogy for it, and how far back it dates, this idea.
I am now trying to find my files. Which other questions did we miss? We missed the ones from the group 2, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you, group 2, take those while I'm trying desperately to find the next presentation?
Okay. I have our presentation on my screen.
Okay. Yeah, but then I have to, there you go. Hang on. Hey, I'm working on it. I think I have a breakthrough. There we go. Okay. Here we are. Group 4. Can you see it now? No? Okay. It's coming. Eureka. You see it now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So here we go. Kendall and Alicia?
Yes. All right. So to start with the film Misrepresentation, our 3 main takeaways from this film. Our first one is that girls grow up seeing themselves only for their body and as objects, which is how they are represented in the media, considering that the media has always been overwhelmingly in the hands of men. And our example of this, which we included examples that the film discussed, and our example is that all movie genres revolving around a woman's attractiveness are like chick flicks, and their only purpose is to get a guy. And women are rarely the protagonist of a movie. And so with girls growing up seeing that they're always portrayed as trying to get a guy, or it's the highlight is on the man, it really goes to show that from the men's perspective that they're more of like an object which they grow up seeing themselves as. And our second takeaway was that a woman's intellect isn't valued as much as her beauty. And our example from this was that women are told to wear revealing or sexy clothing while reporting the news on platforms such as Fox, and this degrades and sexualizes them in the public's eyes, and it's harder for them to be taken seriously because of this. And our third takeaway is that women are discouraged to be in a role of leadership and power. And the example was Sarah Palin when she ran for office. She made headlines focusing more on her appearance rather than on her politics. And this just goes to show, same with Hillary Clinton, to discourage women from the role of leadership. And then our question, which we'll get back to later, is why does the media have such a big influence on teenagers?
Yeah, hold that thought with the question, because I want everybody to see all these great presentations. So the mosque you live in?
Okay, so this one, we both had a hard time accessing the movie, so we actually weren't able to watch it. But we watched the trailer and we read a couple articles about it, so we have a good idea for what it was mainly about. And so one of our main takeaways is that boys are told to man up from a young age, making them feel as though they have to be tough, emotionless, and display power over others in order to be a man. And an example of that is that some derogatory phrases that men hear on a regular basis are things like man up, stop acting like a girl, grow some balls, and so much more like that. And these phrases are both harmful and sexist. And so another main takeaway is that for men, respect tends to be linked to violence. And boys, this is shown by the fact that boys get in fistfights way more commonly than girls do. This even starts out in elementary school and then continues on through the adulthood, through the lives of older men.
Yeah.
And another takeaway is that men think it's unmanly or humiliating to seek help when it comes to mental health, because they feel like they should be strong enough or tough enough to be able to fix it on their own. And an example of that is that less than 50% of boys and men with mental health challenges seek help, and a lot of them end up resorting to desperate behavior like self-harm or suicide. And so a question that we have, which we can either discuss now or after the other one, is that how can we redefine masculinity to be more positive and supportive?
I think let's keep the questions, but they're also very good. Did you have a discussion in the US about these safe houses for women and for domestic violence? Because they are so much in demand now here. Apparently people are freaking out by, staying at home. Did you have that discussion also?
I think it was a discussion, but I don't know if there was a lot of focus on it.
Okay.
But I think it was a topic that if you were passionate about it, then you could have found more information and potentially done something. But I don't think that if you weren't looking for it, you would have really known.
Here everybody thinks that, okay, there's no crime because everybody stays at home, no cars being stolen. So someone was asking, a friend of mine was asking the police and saying, so are you all on, leave? And he said, oh no, because we're so busy with domestic violence. So yeah, that's the toxic masculinity. So next wonderful group. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Danielle, Kiana, and Christina?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so for misrepresentation, so for our takeaways, the first one, basically, the media's view on women is very particular, and no matter what they do, the media will always bring looks into the question. So even in politics, when the way you look should not even be a topic of discussion. It really doesn't matter at all. It still manages to weave its way into the media, like Sarah Palin being the ideal, delicate, and beautiful woman and then became a sex object to men, and Hillary Clinton being, like, air quotes, too masculine because she is powerful and doesn't allow herself to be pushed around or dressed sexually. And then our second takeaway was basically teenage girls are not seeing positive role models in the media, and women are brought up to look perfect and not to be smart, for lack of better words. They're constantly raised, and they put pressure on young girls to continue to strive to be these things. And then our question down below, someone else wants to take that one.
And then our question was, or is, it's kind of a two-part. Has anyone in this class been affected by the misrepresentation of women? And do you think things in the media will ever change? And if so, how?
Also very interesting. Why don't you save the questions for last, but I think everybody should chip in with some answers afterwards.
And then for the Mask You Live In, some of the takeaways that we saw was, like, from a young age, men struggle with their identities because they're taught to hide their emotion and, like, be a man, which is a big reason why they lash out in other ways later in life. And, like, they're pressured by friends and adults and even the media to, like, disconnect from their emotions, devalue friendships, like, degrade women, and, like, violence. And then the second one is that boys and men constantly must prove their masculinities to others. And the movie talks about how, like, unhealthy masculinity is, like, always talked about in American media and culture. And, like, being considered a man or being masculine enough is a huge part of a boy's social life. And anything different could mean them becoming a social pariah, and how boys and young men are just looking up to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Do you want us to read the question for that one or no?
No, I think we should go on with the next presentation, and then you catch up with your questions afterwards.
Okay.
Because I'm worried about the time. So this would be the last group. And you can't see it, I guess, because I'm getting the hang of it, but it's, I love this picture.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll start for misrepresentation. Some of the main takeaways that I had was that women are only valued for their looks in any kind of form of media, whether it be television, ads, movies, and they're all fitted to the male gaze, which was discussed a little bit earlier. And it's really negative because it creates an unattainable beauty ideal, and then it's created a society where 78% of girls are unhappy with their body image before they turn 17, and 68% of women and girls have eating disorders, whether it's minor ones or really severe ones, but still, it's really terrible. A lot more women tend to self-objectify, and women feel that they lose their value after 39 and 40 because they're no longer considered, like, attractive or as attractive by society. Also, the majority of national leadership members represent just 6% of the population, which is pretty much white, wealthy, straight, middle-aged men, which is really problematic because how can they represent the entire country properly? Another thing was that female actresses, directors, editors, producers, and other women behind the scenes and in media are objectified, sexualized, and outnumbered by men. And
this especially started in the 1990s when there was an increase in sexual images in advertising and video games and music videos. And research has shown that there is a link between violence in TV advertisements, music videos, and video games, and the acceptance of rape and sexual harassment. And objectifying women this way creates a culture that dehumanizes women and makes it more acceptable to commit rape and sexual violence toward women, which is obviously also really bad for men and boys, which is talked about more in The Mask You Live In. So I'll pass it on to someone else in my group.
All right, so society places a lot of pressure on boys to be masculine, which is damaging to their self-esteem. And there's a huge focus on hypermasculinity. And then another takeaway was that we live in a society with a social system that polices emotions from men. And then the film talks about the toxic language that young boys grow up hearing, and that impacts their self-esteem throughout life. And so some examples are: be a man, don't cry, don't be a pussy, don't be a bitch, grow some balls, or man up. And something that goes along with that is it's saying that it's bad to be a woman or it's bad to be female, and that causes problems for everyone. And so some other lies that were talked about in the film was that showing emotion makes you weak, and that being masculine leads to economic success. So those are both things that I could relate to, because those are things I've noticed, and so those stood out to me. If you want to go to the next one. So some of the statistics are that by the time a boy is 5 years old, he is taught that it's not okay to cry in public. 1 in 4 boys report being bullied in school, but only 30% report to adults. And then another really important point from the film was that we have a culture that does not value what we feminize. And so some things that we have feminized are relationships, emotions, and empathy. And then it also talked about video games and how exposure to violent media often leads little boys to be less sensitive to the pain and suffering of others.
So some other key takeaways that we found from especially watching this one was that hypermasculinization and hyperfeminization reflects cultural tension and fears the fact that gender is socially constructed. And I think that in general, like everything is socially constructed, and just the way that, especially with like the male gaze, and like I feel like it's a lens that we kind of are forced to see through, and like so is just what we see every day, and just having a general socially constructed society makes us see what everybody else wants us to see or what we should see. And like the media forms the social construct and what women and men should look and act like. So I know in the second movie especially, they were talking about men, and like if they had any type of feminine tendencies, you know, they would be called gay or a fag, and just really nasty comments just because they decided to wear a certain thing because it didn't go with a social construct. And that in general masculinity is a performance, and like I think it's a lot that, like they said, like guys are scared to cry and scared to show emotion, and that they have to put on this face or this mask and put on a performance to hide like their genuine emotions just because they want to act like a guy. So I think that just in general, like guys through this movie have like opened up a idea that like they should be able to show emotion. And just I think, especially at least for me, from like a girl's perspective, like you don't realize that some guys are raised this way. At least for me, like I have a brother, he's an emotional person, but with a lot of people, like they didn't get the same role model aspect that my brother did, to say that it's okay to show emotion and that it's just something that we're not allowed to show or used to. And then our question that we came up with was, what do you think are the beginning steps into changing these social norms? Where should we start, and how long do you think it'll take to see a change? Just because I think there needs to be one for sure, with both aspects of how we see women and how we see men in general.
Wonderful. Does anybody want to go into that question? Because I am trying to upgrade us for 10 more minutes. So that's why I am a little distracted again. But do you want to discuss that? Oh, there we go.
I just think, at least like from a male's perspective, I think that's definitely the case. Like when you're younger, definitely like that you're supposed to hide your emotions. But as you like become more mature and like grow and like have a close group of people around you, I think it definitely becomes more acceptable to talk, and like you become more open with people that also like want to share their emotions.
But do you find that it's so you find that when you're with your friends it's okay, but when you go out in the world it's more of a mask you put on?
I just think it's like a matter of time, you know, because like I was definitely raised like to like along with like the mask thing, like to hide your emotions, but like as I become more mature, I'm definitely more open to sharing my emotions and like in the world, like displaying myself as a more emotional person.
Mm-hmm.
Even though like some people definitely aren't still as they grow. That's just my
So how can we work going forward? How can we work on you know, as being aware of that dynamic and trying to change it?
I mean, I think that like parents and teachers and coaches should be making a comfortable space for their children or students or whatever to be talking through emotions. Like I just, a lot of people are scared to speak up, or they think it's weird, or they don't have that safe space or the time to do it. So if people make the time, then it'll make it easier to become a practice in like a young boy or a girl's life.
Yeah, I think that's also a really big responsibility on the media industry as well. And just going forward, how men are portrayed in, especially in video games, those that are super violent and stuff. I think that there needs to be a bigger conversation surrounding those sorts of things, and even movies and stuff, and how impactful that can be on young boys.
I mean, and on top of that, I think like in like school too, like how in The Mask You Live in, like the little boy, I think there was like a little boy and his mom, and the little boy would come in from school and like wait till his mom would drive away from school and then start crying because he didn't want anybody to see. And like I think just like kind of showing in school at such a young age like where it's happening and when it's happening, like I don't know if the teachers at least like making some statement of like boys can have emotions, or just some type of lesson at like a really young age to like really implement it.
Yeah.
I would add that as long as there's, I think something really important is the maintenance of the discussion, and that like you can't expect someone who was raised a certain way to, after hearing about it once, be like, oh, you're right, you know, I can express myself this way, or I can behave in this way. But I think it's really important to maintain the discussion and make sure it's relevant, you know, whenever there's examples of it in the world, and even when there aren't, bringing it up and noticing it for what it is, just making a point to verbally observe the way gender roles are acting around you and making it prevalent to the people around you, so that you know that everyone's talking about it and thinking about it, not just once, but routinely, to create an environment where it's almost natural to see those things, to, you know, in any situation, not have to work to see gender roles, but to see them for what they are, in order to make change happen.
Yeah, there's definitely also the question of how, I mean, daycare and toys. Some of you have been writing about toys in your critical response paper. And I mean, at school also, I mean, it's a lot of weight to put on these teachers and everybody, but they need also to, I think, be really aware that how they treat girls and boys regarding, for instance, the STEM. Some of you also talked about the STEM education professions. And I mean, how can we make girls interested in math and engineering and all of this. And boys also more interested in psychology or arts. And that it's okay. I mean, it's also about this very competitive approach that there is in this masculinity, and because you have to win over someone, you have to compete all the time. And maybe some of the things that the values that you could put into the discussion is also, I mean, it's also okay not to win. You can actually, you know, help someone else to win. I don't know if it sounds too soft, but so everybody, before you decide to go out and get drunk for the weekend in your garden or with your dog or with your parents maybe, I just want to make sure that you all know that you have to submit a subject for the midterm essay to me at the latest on the 28th. Some of you already did, and it's a broad scope, and you can, you know, think what is interesting for you, and I'm always excited to hear your perspective, and I think already I've got to know you a little bit more, so I'm excited to read those. Next week we have 2 sessions on marginality and sexuality. I've already, if you haven't seen it, I have uploaded a link to Skam, which is a Norwegian series, which is, I know you love it. I just know it. It's every class that sees it is sort of, it's about these high school kids in Oslo. And it was made really interesting from a totally different perspective than traditional drama. And the 3rd season, which I would like you to see, is the season also about sexuality, more so than first season was about, you know, boy meets girl, girl meets boy, blah, blah, blah. 3rd season is actually about coming out as a homosexual. So it's interesting. And then there's this really weird documentary from Norway also, and it's not because Norwegians are strange, it's just that they've managed to do some interesting stuff that I wanted to show you. It's called Here We Are, or We Are Here Now. You get a Vimeo link for that, and it's about these, I don't know what the American word for it is, these groups of parents with their kids. What do you call them? Parental groups or something? Anyway, it shows you a really untraditional perspective on heterosexuality and heteronormativity, because it's weird, and I'm not even sure I like it that much, but I want you to see it because I think it's a very different perspective on how to be a parent, or not very, but different. And we will do a live session again next Friday, same time, if it's okay with you. And I will try and get a little bit more organized and maybe a little simpler in the setup so that we have more time to discuss, if that's okay with you. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I will upload this also, and you can see it, or I can also upload the PowerPoint, or you can do it actually yourself on the discussion board, because I think you did some good stuff, and we can make a group of these presentations also. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.